My first reaction when I heard this news was that many of these steps are not surprising from the coming administration in that they were telegraphed. But what is rather surprising is the extent of these decisions and the speed of these decisions alongside so many other executive orders. The fact that USAID and foreign assistance are so central to the early steps of this administration demonstrate that the Trump administration really does care about U.S. foreign aid, just not in the way that many people think of using that term, care. The U.S. Agency for International Development is the U.S. government's primary foreign assistance arm, working on global development and humanitarian issues, working on global health and food security, and international democracy and rights issues around the world. In the last recorded year, USAID managed about $40 billion in U.S. foreign assistance, and the total of U.S. foreign assistance hovers around $60 billion. All of that is relatively small in terms of the U.S. budget. It is less than 1/100th of the U.S. budget. There are lots of reasons to care about U.S. development and humanitarian policy, but its relative size as a share of the budget is not one of them. So there can always be improvements and reforms for effectiveness and efficiency, but it wouldn't make, the priority list in looking at programs across the U.S. government if that's your intent in terms of cost savings. It's hard to quite wrap my head around why it's such a target, but USAID packs a punch, really, for the amount that it spends of U.S. taxpayer dollars. It has a big impact around the world, and it's not viewed favorably by a number of leaders in the current administration. That said, it's historically had a lot of bipartisan support. U.S. foreign aid makes a tremendous difference in countries around the world. As an example, over the past couple decades, U.S. programs connected to HIV/AIDS and malaria alone saved more than 35 million lives around the world. That makes a big impact in those communities, in those economies, to U.S. standing around the world. And that's just one example. U.S. operations are related to food security, water security, other types of democracy and governance programs, freedoms. All of those programs actually have a huge impact in countries that are often low and middle income countries. So the US is actually currently involved in an intense and intensifying competition, a geostrategic competition, largely with China, but also with other adversaries around the world. And the US is vying for partnerships with developing countries around the world. So by taking these steps, these drastic, draconian steps with regard to U.S. foreign aid, it actually could have the effect of ceding the battleground or ceding the playing ground, if you will. And others will very enthusiastically fill that void. And the U.S. influence and standing around the world could easily be diminished by this. And a lot of lives will be impacted very quickly, already immediately, by these freezes on U.S. foreign aid. I think the impacts on the American economy are still to be seen. It does certainly in the immediate term affect thousands of people's jobs who are Americans trying to execute against American values in action. Lots of people at the agency. The agency employs a lot of institutional support contractors who were let go last week, but also the U.S. government put on hold, put a freeze on all current programming related to foreign aid. And that affects countless implementing organizations that are for-profit and nonprofit organizations helping to partner with the U.S. government to advance what Congress has appropriated this money for. It's actually a little bit unclear and untested as to the powers of the president in this situation. Usually, for any significant changes, Congress needs to be notified and given a period of time, and congressional appropriators would absolutely consider what's happening now as a significant change. And really, Congress is in its right to step up and claim that they have the power of the purse and they have the prerogative over such large changes, such as dismantling an entire agency of the US government. That said, USAID does operate under the authority of the Secretary of State. It just operates as an independent, separate agency for a lot of good reasons in terms of the expertise, the time frames, the special characteristics of foreign aid that are different from day-to-day diplomacy.